You're on mute, Wendy.
That's helpful. I'm on mute. Yeah. that's been the catchphrase of the year, isn't it, since COVID? You're on mute. Unmute yourself. So I was just saying welcome to the show, and Brian is here to help us celebrate International Women's Day as well. He insisted. So we're here. We wanted to mark the day, and perhaps not surprisingly, in our patriarchal world, women's voices are often overlooked, ignored, suppressed, and invisibilised, while men more easily rise to prominence. And this is true even in our movement, which is made up predominantly of women. So to mark International Women's Day, we will be exploring the work and ideas of some of the inspiring women within the animal movement. So from the early pioneers of the vegan movement, such as Batt and Kathleen Jannaway, to contemporary feminist writers, speakers, and activists, such as Carol J. Adams, Joan Dunayer, Patrice Jones, Dr. Corey Lee Wrenn, Af and Silko, and Kath Clements. And that, of course, is not an exhaustive list. There are many more we could have focused on. But women do really enrich the movement with their philosophical ideas, practical application, and a wealth of wisdom in their visions for a liberated world. So please do share your perspectives, as always, in the comments. We'll try and get through as many as we can. And say hello as well. Let us know you're here so we can say hello. Nella, I think you had a few words to say as well.
I just wanted to say that women have always been on the front lines of any struggle against oppression. And this movement is no different. Women activists, women academics, women authors, and today we'll celebrate their work. And we'll remember those who lost their lives defending other animals and fighting against injustice, like Jill Phipps and Regan Russell. But this is not something we should do once a year. Female voices should be heard every day. And as activists, we should be aware of whose voice we try to amplify and whose voice we try to silence.
Well said, Nella. Well said. And speaking of women, actually, Deb has just made a comment. And hi, Deb. Hi, nice to see you. She's just messaged to say that she's just listened to a podcast that I did with Louise Ryan. Louise is, again, an amazing a woman activist, been in the movement for decades, and I did an interview with her, and she tells some incredible stories. So do check that out. That's on Thrive Vegan World. Sorry to plug my own podcast on here, but that's on Thrive Vegan World podcast. But I'd love to get Louise's story out there, and there are some other women on that podcast as well. So yeah, we've got quite a few here now. We've got Deb. I just said hello to Deb. Hey, we've got Vegan Pixie Warrior. Hey there. And we've got, I'm still going to go back to the top. Sorry. We've got Sentient X, Grumpy Vegan Grandad. We have, I think, John Holton. We have Michael Askew. I was going to say Wendy McGovern, that's me. and Tom. We've got Amber Sky, and we've got Vegan Gaze. And did I miss anyone coming back down? Terry. Hi there, Terry. Nice to see you. Oh, Ronnie. Hello. Just mentioning Louise as well. Ronnie's listened to that podcast as well, so it is fabulous. And we've got Jennifer. We've got Tracy Clayton. Hi, Tracy. We've got Gawain, and we've got Bernie V. I think I got everyone there. So nice to see everyone.
Nina from Finland.
Oh, sorry, Nina. I didn't mean to miss you. So I think, Roger, you have a little something to share with us about some women activists from the 1980s, by any chance? You can't do that. You can't give me the finger on International Women's Day. I'm not having it.
I withdraw.
Wind that finger in. Yeah, respect the finger.
I withdraw my finger, which any way you like. Okay, so really, the main thing we're doing today is going through some of the ideas from the theorists and the writers. So I just wanted to talk about a few of the activists that I've known from a long time ago until now. I'm not going to say from 1980, but it was about that time. So the only writer I'm going to mention actually is Rebecca Hall, who is not going to be featured today, but she was kind of like a writer and activist in a sense, because she started, she had a book called Voiceless Victims that some people will remember, but it's a bit obscure. And also she started a group called Writers Against Vivisection with her partner G.F. Newman. So that really is the only, as it were, writer. So I just wanted to mention a few activists. So I'm just going to run through this fairly quickly. Nancy Phipps, I didn't know Jill, unfortunately, but Nancy was really nice person. Paddy Broughton, Margaret Manzoni, Mimi Spence, Jenny Spence, Beryl Spence, Spence family, very active back then, Wendy. Debbie Smith, Serena Rowlands, Irina Corolina, and all the other women who were very active in the formation and maintenance of the Vegan Information Project. Sandra Higgins of Go Vegan World, Vivian Smith, Bernie Wright. We mentioned on a recent show that Bernie had been ill. I can now report that Bernie is out of hospital and seems to be recovering. Alison McKeon, Fiona Hughes. Some people might know Fiona as Fiona Callender. Some nameless women associated with the LF, so I won't actually mention their names. I want to mention my sister, Lynn Yates, who went vegan in the early 80s and became the National Secretary for the Council for the Prevention of Cruelty by Angling, one of the first active groups against angling. And I think she was the National Secretary when I think they had about 7 members or something like that. But I do remember kind of printing out all kind of stuff and posting it everywhere and everything else. And then finally, I want to say Wendy and Nella of the present day as incredible women activists of our time. And finally, I want to mention Jennifer Faust, who's an activist at the moment with the VIP. So that's me. Yeah, that's a lot. I'm ticking them off as I go, so I think I've got everybody. To be honest, I could have put Louise Ryan in there. I could have put loads of people. I tried to make a list of 10, and I found it was absolutely possible. It was like me picking my 10 best bowling tracks. It just wasn't possible at all. So I ended up with all those. So yeah, there you go. But these are activists, the background of the movement in the grassroots. So there's always been loads and loads of vegan activists who are women.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, well
now
said,
what we do, folks.
So we've got a whole bunch of different quotes and a few clips. We'll get through as much as we can to sort of showcase and just highlight some of the work from different kind of writers, philosophers, activists. Hey, thanks, Deb. So maybe we can start with the first quote, if that's okay. Think.
Yep.
Yeah, so we have the sorry, Roger, you going to say something?
Yeah, no, sorry, Tom, I shouldn't have said that. Go ahead.
That's okay. So yeah, this is a quote from Eva Batt, one of the early pioneers. I think she did a lot of great work back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. Involved with the Vegan Society and a lot of other social justice campaigns. And the quote reads, Veganism is one thing and one thing only, a way of living which avoids exploitation, whether it be for our fellow men, humankind today, the animal population, or the soil upon which we rely for our very existence.
Yeah, I think that was correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was 1965 when that particular one was written, and I use that quote. It seems to be odd to talk about the exploitation of the soil, but I think we know what Eva Batt was getting at in the sense talking about things like topsoil, which vegans rely on, and that kind of stuff, and really talking about I guess in the end kind of veganic gardening or veganic agriculture. But again, it goes to show the kind of expansive view of veganism. In my view, I think this is one of the best quotes from the pioneers.
Yeah, they had that real.
Sorry, go ahead, Wendy.
That's okay. I was just saying they had that real vision of that connection of the kind of oppressions and of other animals, humans, and the environment, like which we talk about today. But even then, they had that kind of vision.
The use of the word men is obviously explained by the time this quote was written.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, Roger. Can I ask you a question, Roger? Actually, because you're a little knowledgeable on the pioneers, let's say. Why do you think it is? And is this again? Is this related to kind of the patriarchal world we're in? That it's Donald Watson that always gets kind of, but he's the most well-known of the pioneers, and he's the one that gets quoted and the one that everyone knows about and would mention. Whereas obviously Eva Batt, Kathleen, Jannaway, and others were obviously quite active within the start of the vegan movement
as well. Yeah.
And why is it, do you think, that we don't know their names? Is it that invisibilization of women that we're so normalized? Do you think it's partly that, or is there anything else going on?
Well, I think it could be analysed as that, and certainly, that would be a feminist-inspired interpretation. That the loudest voices are usually the male ones. At the moment, in terms of the most prominent people in our movement, a lot of those are men as well. So, yeah, it's something like that. I mean, if you think about Donald Watson, who married Dorothy Morgan, who became Dorothy Watson, or Dot Watson. Mm-hmm. They are the two that invented the word veganism, but most people attribute it just to Donald. But so the good people, there's a couple of sociologists, well, there's three really, but there's the two main sociologists, Kate Stewart and Matthew Cole. They're working at the Donald Watson Archive, and they found that they were at a theatre together when they came up with the word vegan. But as usual, as it were, the man kind of takes the credit. Actually analysing why that seems to persist over time is really interesting, and it's probably multifaceted, but it's certainly the case that men tend to be the ones who become the spokespersons and the ones who become remembered. And it's certainly the men in the pioneer stage of our movement that are remembered the most. We think of 3 or 4 names, but not necessarily the women,
Yeah. Should we bring the next one? I think a fellow pioneer, the next one. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm just letting it roll on. Hang on a second.
So this one reads, compassionate living is about making connections between the way we live and the way others suffer, between consumerism, industrial development, and the destruction of the planet. It involves a commitment to work non-violently for change, promoting lifestyles that are possible for all the world's people, sustainable within the resources of the planet, environmentally friendly, and free from all exploitation of animals and of people. And that's Kathleen Jannaway. So again, it's that vision of, and that interconnectedness that we see a lot with the feminist thinkers in the movement, actually, that sort of intersectionality or entanglement or multidimensional connections between these injustices, which I think, again, really highlights when people try to reduce veganism down. It's just about this. It gets reduced to a diet, or it gets reduced to it's just about other animals, and we know that that's the focus, and it definitely is, but the scope was so much bigger. And I think it's really good to highlight that people often don't realize the scope of veganism. They only focus on a very reduced element and the focus.
What about this bit? I mean, Nella mentioned that some of the language, say for Eva Batt, writing in the 60s, this one I think is more like 80s and probably even early 90s, but not sure if we would now say this thing about promoting lifestyles that are possible for all the world's people. The idea of a white person saying that might be problematic now, might it? In the sense that, it's, I mean, that kind of smacks a little bit of colonialism, doesn't it? What do you think?
It can, but on the other hand, there is a talk in the movement about being inclusive and taking under consideration the specific struggles different people from different cultures face when it comes to veganism.
Yeah, well, I guess it's not saying that one, as it were, fits all. But again, I think some people might just rankle at that a little bit. I mean, I agree with Wendy. I think the actual breadth of this is really amazing. It's hard to imagine anybody in the modern movement putting so much into a couple of sentences, really. I mean, there's absolutely loads of things, including presumably you could read the consumerism, industrial development thing as an anti-capitalist sentiment. You would think destruction of the planet. You could read that as environmentalism. So it really does incorporate a load of the values of the vegan movement in its kind of overarching, kind of expansive way, which I think, I think Kathleen Jannaway was quite remarkable, really. And in some ways, I suppose, whilst the vegan society kind of moderated, which social movements do, Corey Wrenn would talk about that. I don't think Kathleen Jannaway was going to go that way, and so she split away from the vegan society, and she formed Movement for Compassionate Living, which kind of had some kind of anarchic themes about it. Talking about even things like abolishing money and stuff. So doing a lot of stuff by bartering between autonomous vegan villages and this kind of stuff. So I think that she was very aware that social movements tend to kind of moderate over time, and she wasn't having it, and so she left one of the early splits of the movement, I suppose. Should I move on, or does anybody else want to say anything about Kathleen Jannaway?
I just want to say that from like doing the bit of research that I did for the show, that it appears to me like there's like this continuing thread of the pioneering women in the movement saw these different connections through their experience, through their intuition, and I think this quote kind of epitomizes a lot of Kathleen's own lived experience, through the political kind of work that she did through socialism, the campaigns for peace, and all these other things. I think probably, I'm guessing, but I'm wondering if that kind of informed and gave her this kind of holistic understanding and able to make these connections to veganism and animal rights through that. So it's a beautiful quote.
And just before we move on, that may be, I can't quite remember now, but that may be the theatre that I was referring to without knowing the name. If people want to check that kind of detail, you can go to Vegan Sociologists on YouTube, and there's a kind of lecture given by Kate Stewart and Matthew Cole about the Donald Watson archive. It's really, really interesting. Should I move on, folks?
And also, before we move on, Roger, you've written a series about the pioneers of the movement. So if someone wants to read them, where should they go to?
Well, I'm not totally sure now, because they were on VegFest Express, but that's been superseded now by the new VegFest magazines. So I'm not totally sure where they are, although I did post something that Tim Barford posted this morning, and it was about Kathleen Jannaway. And so it was my essay about Kathleen Jannaway. Tim posted it because I didn't know what it was, and so I kind of linked in with that. So I suppose if you click on that, you could see if the other ones are still there. So I don't know whether they've gone back up again or whether they've gone back up in a new place. I'm not quite sure. I kind of lost track of my own writing really a little bit there.
It's a really interesting series. If anyone can actually find it, it is really, really interesting. I learned so much from Roger's writings on that.
Goes all the way up to that guy. What's his name? Oh, that guy who co-founded the LF. What's he called?
I can't think who you're talking about.
No.
Some nobody.
Yeah. Apparently he turned 70 recently, but I didn't care. So.
We don't mean it, Ronnie. He's there somewhere. He's here.
Well, here's another one of those big statements.
Yeah, very big statement from Kath Clements. And the quote reads, "Veganism is about having a consistent approach to human rights, animal rights, ecology, and the world food problems."
Yeah, that's from the 1990 book. I said the last time we used this quote that I would have put animal rights first in that list of things, but the meaning would be the same, I suppose. Of course, ecology I think this is obvious, really, I guess, but ecology used to be the name for environmentalism. So, but, I think everyone kind of knows that in a way.
So we can see that until recently, the scope of the movement was very clear to everyone.
Yeah. I always give the anecdote of the fact that, when I came in as a SAB, it was really common to get leaflets from various groups of all kinds of things in the van. And so you would find yourself going, we used to SAB 2 or 3 times a week in those days, but you would certainly SAB on a Saturday. So you go on a SAB on a Saturday, you'd go on a demo on a Sunday, or even some kind of raid in an hour or something. And then on the Monday, you might find yourself a Rock Against Racism gig. And then on the Wednesday, you might find yourself on a Reclaim the Night march. And we just kind of did it all in those days without really thinking that was a kind of issue at all. It was just entangled naturally in a way. Should I move on, or got anything else to say?
Yeah.
Okay. Give it a few seconds. Quite a few seconds.
So this is from Dr. Corey Lee Wrenn, and this quote reads, "Given that species, class, race, gender, and other identity categories are all historically constructed using similar mechanisms such as animalization, objectification, sexualization, depersonalization, denaming, and so on, it is important to apply an intersectional perspective to achieve a more accurate understanding of oppression for non-human animals and humans alike." So Dr. Corey Lee Wrenn is a sociologist and a vegan feminist, and specializes in other animal and human relations. So she's currently lecturing at Kent University. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Kent University.
And she's also the co-founder of the International Association of Vegan Sociologists.
Yeah.
And she set up what's it called? Is it vegan?
The Vegan Feminist Network.
Vegan Feminist Network, that's right. I think she said she's not very active on there at the moment, but it's really great. There's some really great content in there, and I think she will get more active again. I think there's blogs in there and some great kind of articles and things to look to.
You can also, she has a website, and if folks are interested, you can go on her website and subscribe to her email newsletter, which she sends out, like, I think it's every month or so, but there's some really good pieces in there that she puts in the
and she's very active on Twitter as well, I believe.
Yes, and today, if you go to her Facebook page, she shared one of her presentations on women's history in the movement, which is very interesting. And also...
this is one of her books.
Yes.
And, we can't see you, Roger, so I'll put mine up.
That's on my reading list too.
And if you
Roger, sorry, I was just saying to Roger, we've got a quote up, so we couldn't see his
book. If you go to her Facebook page, you can also have free access to a lot of the articles she's written on several issues, and they are very interesting.
Yeah, some really great ideas, because actually it's vegan feminism is kind of extending from ecofeminism, which is, that whole kind of response to that male-centric view. Sorry, just grabbing my book here. That response to male-centrism and of environmental and philosophical thought, and but it explicitly recognizes marginalized groups as well. So really kind of looks at that intersectional perspective, very critical of the gendering process, often informed by spiritualism, intuition, and emotion. This is ecofeminism, and it's the ethic of care and community, which is emphasized over and above individual rights, for example. And it does incorporate an activist component. But I think for Dr. Corey Lee Wrenn, she does have a few differences to that, in that she believes that the care ethic could leave those without rights unprotected. So she doesn't just completely advocate for that feminist ethic of care. She just still believes that we need some rights. And also the ethic of care could be, seems patriarchal and patronizing as well, or like, you know, people just need to be cared for kind of thing. And also the fact that it perhaps just looking at care could reify the gender essentialism, in that saying almost, because ecofeminists look at how things are put into like a dualism, like man versus woman, and man is higher, or culture versus nature, culture is higher, reason versus emotion, reason is higher. It looks at those kind of dualities, but it's saying that perhaps if we only look at the ethic of care, then we're actually reifying that, we're kind of reinforcing that, because we're saying, oh, but if we want to be different to the patriarchal system, we're just going to look at care, which then essentializes that as a feminine trait and attribute. So that could be a little bit problematic as well. But it's really interesting to sort of to look at that extension of ecofeminism and bring it into like vegan feminism. Some interesting ideas.
Yeah, of all those dualisms that you mentioned there, Wendy, do you think the rationality associated with male and emotion associated with female is fair? I mean, do you think there is that, you know, strict kind of dividing line between the genders in that sense?
Do you mean, do I think there is, or do you think I think that it's created that to seem that way? Do you think it actually, do you mean, does it actually?
Yeah.
So I don't believe it's actual. I don't believe that we are essentially rational or emotional, but I feel like it's like a construction. It's part of that gender construction where, you know, as soon as a child is born, the first question that is asked is, oh, you're having a boy or a girl? And immediately that child will be treated differently depending on what gender they're attributed to be. And so, you know, you'll dress the girl in pink, you dress the boy in blue, and you give them different toys, and then they internalize different messages their whole life. And I think one of those messages is boys don't show emotions, boys don't have emotions, boys don't cry, man up, don't be a sissy. All these kind of messages that boys hear, you know, and then girls are given, oh, you know, that you'll cry like a girl or giggle like a girl, or you're too emotional. And it's I think it's created like that, it's constructed like that, but I don't think that's true. I think that we all push down emotions because we feel that they're not valued. Emotion isn't valued in society. We value reason and logic above all else, and so we push down emotions. And I think that's part of the problem of the world, is that we don't know how to regulate our emotions, and so we're all a walking time bomb mess of emotional suppression. That's part of the problem.
It's really interesting you said all that, because I'm kind of taking part in this series that's on Virgin Media, and it's called Eating with the Enemy. There was two guys talking on one of the episodes. I can't remember which one it is. Might have been the one that I'm on, episode 6. I'm not sure. But they were debating about, oh, boys don't cry, and this guy was saying, oh, is that a bit too much for your macho thing? And he was going, I think so, because, you know, as much as I want to, I can't kind of cry. So I can cry at Hollywood films, but if, say, somebody dies or something who's close to me, I can't cry. And he said, I was brought up with the boys don't cry type ideology. And he said the weird thing about that, and this is really interesting in terms of speciesism, is said that nobody actually said that to me. My mother didn't say boys don't cry, and my teacher didn't say boys don't cry, but I still got the message. And that's the power of an ideology. You know, it's really you know. So there's a little bit in here, the bit about depersonalization, denaming and everything, sexualization, of course, which kind of leads into Carol Adams' work, doesn't it? You know, so that's going to be interesting, because I think we might be moving to Carol fairly soon. Should I move on, folks?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's give it a few seconds. The reason there's a delay, folks, is that there is.
Oh, that was quick.
I know, yeah. I'm getting better at this job. It's just the reason there's a delay is I've had to make a film out of these slides, because my slide thing won't work on StreamYard anymore. Just not that anybody cares, but I just thought I'd explain it anyway.
So yeah, we're grateful to have had Carol on the show. I think it was about back at the tail end of last year, and yeah, she's a huge figure in the movement. You know, proponent of radical ecofeminism, and has written numerous books, notably The Pornography of Meat, The Sexual Politics of Meat, and yeah, she's I think forwarded and on other books as well, and given lots of talks, and yeah, just a huge figure. And this quote reads, "Metaphoric boring that depends on violation yet fails to protest the originating violence does not acknowledge interlocking oppressions." And I think for me, this is just a brilliant quote, because I think it sums up the fact that, you know, that forms of oppression do link together, and that if we're just seen to kind of borrowing or utilizing superficially, like another metaphoric comparison, and not actually showing a true acknowledgement or understanding of it, then we're not really acknowledging what's happening in reality or a kind of deeper understanding. So I think it speaks to that a bit as well.
What does that imply, that if we do mention the original violence, then that metaphor is then permissible, as it were? Is that you think that's what she's saying?
I wanted to question Carol more on this, because every time I think about it, I feel like I don't quite get to it. I'd love to kind of really question her on that a little bit more, because I know she has explained it, and I know she doesn't really advocate for direct comparisons, like using a direct comparison of, say, rape, for example. Should I say content warning without for the R word, for, you know, other animals and for women, not because of it not being factually correct or anything like that, but I think from what I understood, from what I heard her say, I think maybe on the show actually, is that it perhaps doesn't do justice to either of those individuals, because it's not, you're not properly acknowledging the original violence that happens to the human woman, but also that part of the experience of the cow is perhaps only a part of her whole experience of what she's of her oppression and exploitation. I think that's the way I understood it, but I'd love to get more out of Carol on that bit.
We'll have the chance to hear from Carol. We have a video about the reference later on.
Well, I can drop this out now and play it now if you want me to.
Yeah, that would be good actually. Sure. Yeah. This is a great clip from Carol.
Hey, Wendy, you're getting so politically incorrect. You'll have to join the royal family soon. You know, other parasites are available. Okay, I'll drop this out. Right. Okay.
Key aspects of intersectionality is that before you get it, you don't see it anywhere. And once you get it, you see it everywhere. So what's the transition? What's the point that creates this new way of seeing intersections? It could be as simple as looking at a Carl's Jr. ad that says, "Breasts so big we can't show them on television." And then they've blocked out the breasts of a chicken. So they're using the fragmentation of women and the sexualization of women's breasts to sell dead, fragmented chickens' parts. If you look at it without the insight of intersectionality, you look and think, well, that's kind of disgusting, or isn't that silly? But when you look at it from the perspective of intersectionality, you see that they're using misogyny to sell speciesism. That speciesism, this attitude of animals are here for us, always needs to be bolstered by other forces. Intersectionality means that in a dominant culture, those who are not dominant for reasons of gender identity, sex, race, class, or species find themselves categorized together.
Yeah, I think there she makes it quite clear, because in Carol's work she talks a lot about the animalization of women and the sexual feminization of other animals, and I think there she's really given a great example of that with this the breasts and the chickens, and it really kind of, it's used a lot. And if anyone hasn't read The Sexual Politics of Meat or pornography of, yeah, she shows some just shocking examples of how this is just ubiquitous in society for advertising, especially, well, I think from all over the world, and especially I think a lot of them are from perhaps North America and things like that, just for kind of diners, burger joints, and things like that, where these adverts are just totally animalizing and feminizing women and other animals. Just really shocking.
Yeah, it seems that North America in particular have going a lot for it, don't they? I remember one of the most shocking things is the turkey hooker. I remember that, that. So it's just a device to stick in the body of a turkey to place into the oven, but they advertised it with a turkey dressed up as a sex worker. Typical kind of male mind stuff.
And she talks a lot about fragmentation as well, that fragmentation of female bodies in kind of adverts where you might just see the torso of a woman. Because it's that taking away, that dehumanization of the woman, taking away from the whole person. You just see fragments, and the same with other animals and their body parts. It's just the breasts, the legs, it's those kind of things, and it's that fragmentation to de-individualize those people. And I think, Roger, you gave an example of that earlier. Yeah, I was quite shocked by it, because when I kind of learned this idea of fragmentation of female body parts, I realized that when you used to go down to get your lunch, this was in one of the Victorian prisons that I was in, you used to go past other people's cells and you kind of glanced in, and some of the guys used to cover all the walls with pornographic pictures. And when they got too many, they started then, as it were, covering over the bits of the women on the walls that they didn't want to see. So you ended up with just loads and loads of body parts, the bits that they want to see. So they might put a picture over a woman's head, for example, unless that involved oral sex, obviously. So you had that fragmentation going on right there in one kind of example, just because the guy ran out of space and he said, okay, well, we don't need that bit of the woman, and so we'll cover it over. Shocking stuff.
And just to mention that in Carol Adams' books, it becomes very clear how one oppression is used to reinforce another oppression.
What do you think of this from Bernie?
Suffering.
I don't agree. The truth is that I don't agree, because we have the sexualization of other animals. We do that to them in order to exploit them and to oppress them. So I don't think that this is disrespectful. That I think that this is realistic. And if you go through the pornography of meat, you can see actual pornography involving other animals, the way their bodies are depicted.
I suppose one interesting question is why the focus is on flesh, isn't it? I suppose, which is an interesting one. You've got the sexual politics of meat and the pornography of meat, rather than products derived from other animals. Of course, that doesn't exactly trip off the tongue, I suppose, but
not a catchy title.
No. Yeah. You can imagine a publisher going, "Yeah, right, yeah. Can't we just say meat?"
Yeah, I would argue it's also problematic from the things that I've seen in the movement, when perhaps some folks, and maybe it's just controversial to say this, because some people may say it's empowering to women, but I would err on the side of that it's degrading and kind of it's some way copying these tactics from industry, promoting like female body parts, women's body parts as consumable. Is when in the movement when we start to kind of offer a mirror to that, but when we promote veganism. So when there are t-shirts, like I commented on Instagram post the other day in which there was a t-shirt saying "Eat pussy, not animals," and for the reasons that I think it's problematic, that it's promotes this idea of consumable women's body parts, and it's trivializing the issue of veganism as well, as a serious justice issue, and obviously we've seen, for example, Roger, you've done numerous takes on this, but Peter using this sensationalist kind of misogynist tactic in their campaigns to try sell veganism as sexy, at the detriment of degrading women, which is problematic on so many levels.
Yeah, well, Ingrid Newkirk kind of latches in onto that mainstream value, which is interesting. We're going to talk about the mainstream, I think, a little later, if I've got the right clip, but we'll come back to that. But the mainstream value of sex sells. In fact, Newkirk has often said that Peter doesn't use sexism, it uses sex, which, fine line, but it really uses, that because they try and get around it by saying, well, we encourage men to strip off as well, but they don't do it as often as they encourage women. And also there's a certain type of a woman that they prefer, obviously the celebrity ones, but also young, thin, white usually. So there is that, so yeah. Okay.
It's difficult because some women will say, well, I chose to do it and I feel empowered, and it's my body, I will use it as I choose. And I suppose, there is that, and you don't want to dictate someone else's experience, but I suppose it's very difficult when that whole strategy is born out of in a patriarchal society that says women's bodies are objects and women's bodies are there for male pleasure. I know we're being very stereotypical here in terms of sexuality, but that kind of patriarchal concept,
gaze,
that male gaze, yes, and that's what obviously they're playing into, and so it's very difficult. And I think there are a lot of grey areas there, but as Tom said as well, whether it kind of belittles the movement as well, because we wouldn't do that for any other social justice movement. So is it effective?
That argument though about, as it were, we're volunteers is really quite a difficult one. It goes back. I remember debates about this, remember the Page 3 girls, the kind of Samantha Fox type person, all the way back to the 1970s. And they would appear on the TV with debates with feminists saying, well, I'm a volunteer and I'm becoming rich because of it. And the feminist response was, well, you think that's what you want to do, but it's actually society telling you. So it's actually quite a difficult argument on both sides of it, because there's no such thing as free will. At the same time, we don't want to suggest that people are just a complete slave to their culture either. So there you go.
It's a difficult one.
Indeed. Should I move on?
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
So this is from Patrice Jones, and the quote reads, "When we affirm that we are our bodies, but deny that our bodies are property, we undermine one of the most destructive ideas in history, that people are something other than animals." So Patrice is, she does lots of things. She's a writer, a speaker, an activist. She educates people on different social injustices. She has a perspective, an intersectional perspective, advocates for ecofeminism, and she's the founder of Vine Sanctuary in I can't remember where that is actually, but the Vine actually, which I didn't know, which I found out today, it stands for something. Can you remember that, anyone? I've just
vegan is the next evolution.
That's right. Veganism is the next evolution.
And I believe
It's the next evolution.
I didn't know that.
US.
Yeah, no, I hadn't realised that, but it stands for that. Veganism is the next evolution. And if anyone hasn't checked out Patrice's talks, they are incredible. Like what I love about Patrice is the talks are. She's a very animated, very passionate speaker, but the way she manages to kind of speak about very complex topics, but in a very digestible way and in a very kind of conversational way, and gives great examples. And I've had some real light bulb moments watching and listening to some of Patrice's work, things that I've read about and before, but some clicks with her. I really relate to her a lot. So
well, we've got an interesting question here from Elliot. It's in two parts. So I'm currently rather late to this live stream, and I come across a quote. It involves the commitment to work non-violently for change. Would you argue that somebody who works violently for change, this is the last bit of it, goes against vegan values then? It's an interesting one, that.
I think we should define what constitutes violence, because here we have the question, is it violence when it's not against other people, when it's against objects? There is a debate on that.
It's a complicated debate, isn't it? Because violence is one of those words that is actually difficult to define. But you know, if a burglary occurred in your house, as it were, you do feel violated. And no, that's not quite the same as violence, is it? But it is again another one of these kind of nuanced ideas. And of course, you've got these ideas about being violent in order to bring about a non-violent world. And of course, someone like Francis Young would say, well, obviously, the history of the human race has been violence. So if violence brought about peace, then we would have peace long ago. So there is that problem. But the kind of just war kind of thing, going to war to bring about peace, all of those things come into that kind of debate. But it is quite complicated, I think.
But I personally don't believe that anyone in the movement, past and present, was violent. I don't see the direct actions as violent, personally, in the sense that they didn't aim to hurt other humans.
Well, some did. I mean, that's why there was a bit of a split, because there was the Justice Department, the Hunt Retribution Squad, and the animal, what's that, militia, animal rights militia. They all declared that they would use violence. Because I remember I wrote an article years ago now saying that the militia was really specious, because they were basically saying that if Barry Horn died on his hunger strike, they would kill 10 vivisectors. And I said, well, why do you have to wait for a human being to die before you kill 10 vivisectors? Because they're killing others all the time. And that's another matter. We do have a clip from Patrice.
Yes,
Do you want?
And actually, yeah, just because actually there's a message or comment rather from Bernie in the group, which ties in quite well with this. So we could maybe bring that up as well afterwards or before. This one? This one. Yes. Okay. And this ties in well with this clip. If it's that clip.
If it's the right one, yeah, I might. Yeah, I got so confused setting all this up that I might not have the right one. If it's not the right one, tell me and I can quickly get it. Okay, so
I probably will. Won't remember. No, I will. I'll know which one it is.
Adorable and charming people that you would ever
No, that's not the one.
All right. Okay. Is that the duck one? Is that the duck one?
That's the duck one. Yeah, that's the duck one.
I picked the wrong one. Okay, let me. Are we going for the just to give me a clue? Are we going for the mainstream one or the other one?
The mainstream.
Yes, the mainstream.
All right. Okay. Hang on a second. Then I'll find that in a second now.
The title of the talk is "Commonalities of Oppression." For anyone who wants to watch it on YouTube, the full.
Hello.
Yeah, that's it. Stella, you keep filling in for me. I'm almost there. I'm almost there.
Yeah, there's some great talks on there, that commonalities of oppression, and there's some other ones talking about what's wrong with what's wrong with animal rights. And there's a few talks from the Animal Rights Conference in Luxembourg. That one that just came up, that was from a different one, and there's a brilliant story at the end of that, which I hope we get time for.
Yeah, you know Patrice Jones' talk at Luxembourg you just mentioned, she completely confuses legal rights and moral rights.
Yeah,
it's really interesting. Anyway, I found the clip. Do you want to play it now that I've rescued myself?
Yeah, before you play the clip, I wanted to mention Patrice's books, Aftershock and The Auction at the Intersection, for anyone who wants to look them up.
Actually, John was just mentioning that actually in the talk, asking about Aftershock. Yeah, so that's Patrice's.
This is a real good advert for the female writers of the movement, isn't it? Brilliant. Okay, are you ready to go?
Yes, please.
Ecofeminist scholars, feminist scholars, including both white ecofeminist scholars and ecofeminists.
Oh no, this is the wrong one, isn't it?
Wrong one.
Oh no!
It is a good one though. It is a good one.
Yeah. Well, oh blimey. Okay.
I know. I gave Roger so many clips, and then we just decided at the end. But obviously,
yeah, I'm completely.
It'll be the last one. That's what everyone's chatting away in the comments anyway. They probably don't need us anymore. They're having a good debate about violence here. Oh, Vegemite Codbod, thank you. This is Brian. Have you met Brian before? He's getting hungry now, so he starts to get a little bit lively.
If this is not right now, I'm going to retire.
You heard that?
We need to do these things for several reasons. One, numbers.
Shit, that's the wrong one as well.
It's the last one.
I know.
That's a good one as well, though.
Yeah,
really good one as well.
They're all good. Yeah, we ended up like deciding between about 12 clips, and I had them all written down, and I couldn't go wrong, and obviously I could. So let me see.
Yeah, we had a very hard time deciding.
I found
Vegan Gaze says it's chaos. Yeah. Oh, that's just normal Vegan Gaze. This is seamless.
You see, if women were in
Natasha
charge,
says, Roger, you're terrible at tech.
Right. I found it now, people. Here it is.
It could be a long evening.
There's a lot of people in the world, like 7 billion now, and a really tiny number of them are white middle-class Americans.
No, I'm sorry, that's not the right one either. Bloody hell! What? I know this clip. I'll tell you what Patrice Jones said. Wow, she said that the mainstream is not the majority, and she was tapping into this idea that when you hear the word mainstream, it implies the majority of people. She was saying that the mainstream is not the majority. That's when she puts her arms out, in case anybody actually goes and watch the clip. And she says, it's all the people outside of the mainstream who are the majority. So if we focus our attention here, this is me doing the thing precisely, then we're missing out all these, the actual majority of people. And so it really makes a very important point about the idea that, a lot of people kind of celebrate the idea that veganism is moving into the mainstream. Well, she's kind of suggesting, that might actually miss the point. That's not necessarily a great thing to do in the first place.
Yeah, what actual clip was that then, the last one, Roger? Because there weren't that many.
No, I don't know.
It was one of those.
Yeah, I'm completely.
It probably was that one.
I think it was the last one.
I think it was that one. It just was probably a little bit before the main bit, because there weren't that many. There was only 3 from that book.
All right. Well, I'm not getting it again. You can forget it.
Oh, everyone to see Patrice if they haven't. Anyway, go check out Patrice's talks because they're brilliant. But yeah, that's it's a really good point that she talks about the majority are not in the mainstream. The majority are out there, basically, and the marginalized groups. Where's Tom gone? Marginalized groups are more likely. Are more likely to get it and to empathize with what we have to say as well because of their understanding of oppression. from their own points of view. So she made some really good points about that. And she also talks about how oppressions compound each other. It's not just a matter of them intersecting. It's one oppression compounds another, and you just get that layering with that as well. So,
well, I mean, we are giving chaos a bad name here, where it's going.
And we seem to have lost a member of the team.
Yeah, we do.
Tom, and this is not a feminist strategy, by the way, just to get rid of the men folk on the team. It's like,
no, Tom's going. I'm not associating with these people. I'm going. well, he ain't come back into the waiting room. So, should we proceed without him, or do we wait? Or
yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, we don't need Tom, do we?
Oh, okay, Tom, we do.
Tom has a technical problem. His computer just turned off, so he'll be with us shortly.
Something in the air.
Right. Okay.
AFCO. So this is from AFCO, who is she is an independent thinker and a digital content creator, and she's the author of Afroism and co-author of Racism as Zoological Witchcraft with her sister Silko. And this quote reads, "Veganism isn't just about kicking a meat-eating habit and getting some veggies into your diet. It's a powerful rejection of a racist food system and a racist cannibalistic politics that characterizes animals and non-white people as disposable and consumable."
Read with
passion. It's quite powerful.
Read with passion.
I felt that one.
Yeah.
I think really interesting ideas from Af and
Silko. Let him back? Hey.
Oh, go on then. Hey, Tom.
Hey, folks.
This has been our smoothest running show. Yeah, hasn't it? Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just. It's
got the blue screen and then everything went dark. So.
What I'll do is I'll edit out all my mistakes and then publish the 15 minutes that are left.
Yeah, that would be amazing. So yeah, really interesting ideas from Af and Silko about, they talk a lot about kind of, again, animalization, going back to that they talk actually not about intersectionality, they talk more about multidimensional oppressions, because they believe that actually intersectional leaves gaps, and it doesn't kind of account for how they kind of interweave and that multidimensional effect. So those books are really great. I think it's looking at veganism from a very different point of view and tying it in with racism. And here again, we could put in this quote, animals, women, we could put any marginalized group into that quote and it would still fit there, I believe, because it talks about, all those intersections again. I think that's something that's kind of an overarching kind of perspective of the feminist thinkers and writers, is that kind of zooming out and seeing the big picture, the interconnection, the layering, the compounding of oppressions. I think that seems like quite a common kind of theme in the women thinkers.
Did anybody think that the first sentence is a bit problematic?
Yeah, it does reduce it to the meat eating.
Yeah, I thought that when I first saw it, because I was thinking, because funny enough, we've got a clip from Silko where she's saying that veganism is not a diet, and yet, I mean, this is not saying veganism is a diet, but it's also kind of reducing it just to flesh, isn't it? Which is a bit weird, I suppose. So,
I guess could it be argued that she's responding to the mainstream perception of what veganism is?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well, because I think that a lot of people, as soon as you mention vegan, it's like, oh, meat, you don't eat meat, and then what else don't you eat, or what do you eat? Most people say, what do you eat? But maybe that's that response to that common perspective.
And I think then there's a lot of comments about violence and non-violence. We ought to do a show on it, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So do you want me to show the Silko one now, or move on to the what do you want to do, team?
I think we could do the Silko now.
and then we can play her clip, perhaps.
Well, that's what I mean. We have we've got a quote.
We've got a quote and a clip.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm completely out of order here now. I've completely lost it, folks. Completely lost it.
I just lost it. You've seen it. You're witnesses.
I'm having a senior moment today.
Is that being ageist to yourself?
Yeah,
I guess ageist to yourself, Roger.
Yeah.
So, Tom, over to you.
Oh yes, sorry.
Yeah. Before you compute.
We've got to crack the whip on these men folk in this team, Manella. Come on.
So Silko says we have to wrap our heads around the modes of thinking that were designed precisely to ensure certain humans, animals, and other non-human life remain outside our moral and social communities. This is not a precious academic intellectual activity. This is absolutely necessary for real change.
I love this quote because it makes so clear that anyone belonging in a social justice movement should bear this in mind. It's not an intellectual academic thing. It's something that we should think of every day and act accordingly and recognize the oppression of others and our privilege and see what we can do with this. One thing that both Sil and Afko talk about a lot in racism as zoological witchcraft is this idea of the other, and how when we put that label to the other is easier to exploit them and oppress them. And I think this is something it can be said for all minorities, for all minority groups, and it's a theme that we've seen in all these quotes, but by women.
Yeah, definitely. They kind of all sort of, again, they intersect with each other. They tie in. They reinforce each other, don't they? These thinkers. Because actually, this relates back to something that Patrice Jones was saying in one of the talks as well, about how people think of intersectionality as just an idea and a concept, but actually, it was created as a tool. As a way of looking at things in order to solve a particular problem. And of course, it came from Kimberly Crenshaw's legal work to find a mode of how to sort of protect Black women who didn't have a call to sexism, because white women weren't experiencing this particular oppression, and they didn't have the call to racism because the Black men weren't experiencing that particular oppression. So there was a gap there. So it was actually, she was finding something. It was a tool to help kind of plug that gap. It wasn't just a concept, an idea to sort of, to think about. It was, how do we solve a problem? And that's what Patrice Jones was really trying to get over in one of the talks, is like, think of this as a way to look at things in order to solve the problems, not just an idea and a concept. And also one thing, because we're not going to play this clip, but there is a clip that I found really powerful, and that Patrice talks about, I know we've moved on to Af and Sil, but just while we're on Patrice, is that she talks about intersectionality as people now use it as an adjective for to describe, and it's almost become an identity. Are you an intersectional? It's like a noun or an adjective. And she says, and this is problematic. It's not to be used like that. It's a strategy or a process or a project can be intersectional or can be looked at in an intersectional way, but you can't just be an intersectional.
Toolbox, isn't it? Described as a toolbox.
Yeah, it's a toolbox and a way of looking at things to solve problems, and that it shouldn't be thrown around as an adjective, a noun, or as an insult, which it often is in the movement now.
Do you think that this quote kind of reminds you of the one thing that we addressed? I'm a bit conscious of the time, actually, but the one thing we addressed last week when we were looking at the critique of Reagan and the rights-based approach, because doesn't it imply the circle and the inside and the outside of?
Yes,
remain outside our moral and social communities. It kind of reminded me of kind of drawing those circles in terms of identify who's in and who's out, those kind of things.
Yeah.
So, we're 6 minutes over, really. So should we, I think, is the next one Dunayer, I think. So we could either go on to Dunayer's slide or play the Silco, but that's 2 minutes long, that, though. So what do you think?
Before we do that, I just want to mention for anyone who doesn't like reading that both books by Silco and Afko are also available in audio form.
Okay. Well, all of them?
Yes, both. Racism, zoological witchcraft, and aphorism.
Excellent. That's good.
Yeah, I listened to one on audiobook, and it's really great, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. If there's anybody out there who doesn't like reading or listening, you're screwed still. So there you go. So what we're going to do, folks? Do we move on with the slide, or do we move on to the Sil clip?
What do you think, Nella? Should we play Sil, or I feel like we won't do justice to Joan if we just rush her.
Let's play Sil.
Okay. So we won't be showing Joan at all then. That's not doing justice as well. There you go. Right.
Let's do both then. I don't mind staying longer if everyone else doesn't want to stay.
My name is Silco. I'm affiliated with the activist group called Afroism. So one of the biggest issues that we have with veganism is that people are well aware, of course, that non-human animals suffer, that non-human animals have social connections, that non-human animals have sophisticated cognitive capacities, and this still doesn't move most people to change anything about how they see food or how they see entertainment. One of the things that Af and I are concerned with is this question: how do you get people to care about non-human animals given you can give them all the facts and they still don't seem to care? So we think there's actually something wrong with the framing of the issue and not necessarily something wrong with people. We think people are actually thinking completely rationally. So in fact, we're the weird ones. So vegans are the weird ones. So we have this big task. How do you get people to abandon or question this normative system which uses animals in a specific way? And we think race is the way to do it. My goal was actually to bring to the forefront that this is a movement that's supposed to be about animals. I'm hoping to bring that issue up front, that it's important that we have benefits from a vegan diet, but we don't want to turn it into this thing about diet or a thing that's just about food, especially just saying the word food constantly in the context of a vegan space is just sort of ironic because we're trying to argue against the idea that non-human animals are food. And so it's a misnomer to even use these two words in the same space. So what we're trying to do is kind of get rid of this idea that people of color are appropriating a movement because we're just so as if we're so blind and so self-involved that we can only be vegan because we're getting some benefit out of it. I don't want that narrative. It would be just as weird. It would be weird, for instance, if we're at a feminist thing and everyone keeps talking about how feminism benefits men, and then you never mention anything about women. And it's true, feminism benefits men and men should definitely be involved and blah, blah, blah. But it would just be very weird if we completely left out the group that this movement was created for. And so I'm hoping that, that my role in this event brought out that issue a little bit.
That's interesting. She talks about us being weird. There used to be a very kind of well-known book in the movement. It was called trigger warning, I suppose, but it's called Vegan Freak, and there's also a radio show called Vegan Freak Radio Show, and it was Bob Torres and can't remember the other person, but another Torres, and so that was then a critique for being ableist but I mean what they meant was that we're kind of freaks in a sociological sense, in the sense that we're breaking all the sociological rules about things, because we are swimming against the tide and everything. So we place ourselves on the outside of the mainstream in that sense, in terms of values. So she was kind of saying that, which was quite interesting.
I always say, oh, if everyone else is normal, I don't want to be. I'm quite happy being weird.
All right, I'll put this back up. Bing. Anyone else got a last comment about Sil or Af before we move on?
I think those books really do offer a very different view from anything else that when I read those, I remember thinking this is a very different perspective, a very different filter to look through. And I think that's really interesting to do that sometimes, because I think we kind of get stuck in our own little bubble of our own thoughts and beliefs, and we tend to kind of stick within that and not look beyond that. But I think sometimes really open up your mind to different views, and that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to agree with everything, but I think just to have that open mind is very important to learning and progressing and evolving as individuals and as a movement as well. I think if we just close down and go, no, this is my belief system, this is what I know, and that's it, then I think we're doomed. I think we have to open up and hear different voices, hear different opinions and perspectives from a different experience, because we can only see from our own standpoint. I think feminists talk about this, having that standpoint. We can only see from our own standpoint, but every other person's got a different standpoint, and we need to sometimes embrace that a little bit. So I really recommend reading those.
Me too.
Okay, I'm trying to move on here. There, this is the last one, folks.
Is it my turn to read this one, Tom?
Who gets to read the last one?
So this is from I always say is it Joan Dunayer or Dunayer? I never know which one to say it. Dunayer. Unable to gainsay speciesism's lies, other animals suffer from human abuse and linguistic power. Considered in relation to the plight of non-human beings, Adrienne Ricks, I didn't know if that's Riches or Ricks. Feminist words express a terrible absolute. This is the oppressor's language. And Joan Dunayer has a book that everyone's trying to get hold of. Tom has the book. Roger used to have the book, and someone borrowed it and never gave it back to him.
Yeah, somebody stole it.
Animal Equality.
Yeah, there were like 2 copies left in the UK, and I think I got one of them. I think this was a few weeks ago. So I'm sorry, everyone.
You should have bought both and held them to ransom.
Yeah, you could have sold it for like thousands on Amazon. No, don't do that. I'm just joking.
I like this quote because he refers to the fact that language is used to oppress, and this is an idea Carol has written about. And language is used to oppress both women and other animals.
Yeah, definitely. And again, we're seeing that overlap and that intersection of oppressions, again, women and misogyny and speciesism through language. And I think, and Carol really uses that in her work as well. I think I think our language is very powerful. I think often in the movement there's like a reluctance and resistance to change language, and it's like, oh, don't be the vegan police. We don't want to be so different in our language that people don't know what we're talking about. But I think we have to bear in mind that through our language we are being political, and we can either reinforce the kind of paradigms, the cultural paradigms that already exist, or we can challenge them. And I think we have to just be more political in our language and challenge those paradigms rather than just reinforce them all the time.
I see some of the YouTubers talking about language police and blah blah blah, but that's so short-sighted. One of the main things we do is use language and critique language, and to ripen people up to a new form of language. I mean, language is completely central to what we do, on the grounds that, as I've said before, social movements are claims makers in society. We identify an issue, a problem, we identify it as a problem, and then we make claims about it. And so language is absolutely crucial to everything we do. And so therefore, in terms of our communication skills, which again relies on language, we should be very, very careful about what we're about. And even if, I mean, obviously there's controversial words that we've talked about, and they've been talked about in the movement of late. It's one thing to think about, do I think that that's true? All these words, do you think that's accurate? But then you've got a second movement question, which is it a good idea to say that? And like in terms of being the spokespersons or the kind of representative of a movement, we have to really think carefully about what we're going to say and the way we're going to do it, because the other side, and also often the public, they're just waiting to kind of find a little chink in the argument, or find something that they can dislike in order to kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater type thing. So the less times we allow people to do that, the better. So it seems to me to be pretty obvious that that's what you should do. Be very careful about your language.
I was just going to say that there is a website, I think it's called Anti-Speciesist Action, and they've done a blog post, blog post, almost like an index actually, with offerings of different language that we can use to promote animal rights. And it's inspired. They've kind of paid tribute to the work of Joan Dunayer in their in the writing of this, and how she's encouraged them through her writing to think more about language. So yeah, truly another avant-garde. And I think someone said in the comments.
Yeah, I think it was Deb.
Yeah, Deb. Joan was ahead of her time in her writings. Yeah, I think it's entirely right, Deb.
There's also Unlearning Speciesist Language, Jeremy's group, and yes. I think Jeremy just did a dictionary or something, didn't he, or something like that?
Yeah, I think is that on his website, veganinteractions.com. There's the whole dictionary of.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I believe it's on there, but I think it's also shared in the group as well, in unlearning speciesist language in that group on Facebook. I think he did post it in there, and I think it's on his website as well.
I'd love to see a video conversation of Joan and Jeremy having a chat. I think that would be great.
What objection to each other's language, you mean?
If I may, as an explanation, I would like to read one of Carol's quotes that we didn't use because we had so many to choose from. And she says, "But just as the generic he erases female presence, the generic it erases the living, breathing nature of the animals and reifies their object status." So language is that powerful, and therefore should be used carefully.
It certainly should. Yeah. I totally agree with that. Right.
I was wondering. I know we're really over time, but do you think to play us out, we could share the duck story, or is it really too late?
The duck story is amazing.
Yeah. The duck story is amazing. I'd love for everyone to see this.
Yeah, you're so nasty to me. I just removed it from the thing. I've got to bring it back in now.
Did you?
I thought there's no way they're going to force me to show that now. And what do you go and do? I don't know.
Who votes for the duck story?
Yeah. If I can remember which one it is. Oh, there it is, I think.
The duck story is mentioned in several of her Patrice's talks. Is that correct?
Yeah, Sam wants the duck story. Yes, so this is in one of the talks. I can't remember which one it was now because there's so many. This is a great talk, and this comes quite to the end, but I think it does again. It's a really great example of. And Natasha wants the duck story as well. See, you're outvoted, Roger. It's a great example of how our modes of thinking, our modes of thinking, and the gender construction and the construction of sexuality and all these kind of paradigms that we create and that we construct in our society do affect other animals as well. And this is a really great example of that. I find it a real example of intersectionality here. Enjoy.
Right, ducks. Here comes the duck story.
Sanctuary. We're now like 500 animals and counting, and all different species. But at first we were just a chicken sanctuary surrounded by poultry farms. And then at some point, we took in a group of ducks rescued from a foie gras factory. And they turned out to be like the most adorable and charming people that you would ever meet. How many people have ever met ducks? Right? I mean, they're so social. They're so interested in everything. And every day is a new day. And water is so great. I mean, you know, who can live with ducks and not just be so happy, right? And so we were just delighted with these ducks. We loved the way that they were so kind to each other. We loved the way that they were kind to the chickens. And these were big ducks who were bigger than a lot of the little chickens. Some of them even adopted some of the injured chickens. The thing is, so there were 8 ducks, and when they moved in, we didn't have enough room to put them in either one of our coops, right? And so we spent a little time with them. We tried to figure out who was friends with who, and then we put, 4 of them went into one of the coops and 4 went into the other coops. One day I come out and to, I don't know, do some kind of chore, and 2 of them are fighting with each other, and I was really upset because the ducks. And so I was like, no, this is a sanctuary. Even the fighting roosters don't fight here. You cannot fight here. What is this? So I tried to figure out like who was the aggressor and who was the victim, and I took the victim and I took him over to the other coop where he would be safe, right? Went about my business. I don't know what I was doing, putting down straw, refilling water bowls, whatever. Maybe 45 minutes, an hour went by. I turn around and there's the one that I had put in the other coop, trying desperately to get over this one fence, talking to the one who'd been attacking him. You don't know, because this was amazing because what he had to do to actually get from one to the other was he had to walk through the yard, he had to climb a 6-foot fence, he had to walk through the woods, to make a sharp left turn, walk up the driveway, make another sharp left turn, and then start climbing this last little half fence, which is where I had found him. So I was like, whoa, I made a mistake, you must be friends. You're having some kind of argument. All right, so I picked him up and I helped him over the fence, and they were like, yes, we're reunited. Go about my business. Come back out an hour later to check the waters or whatever, and they're fighting again. So I separate them. Sure enough, hour later, he had walked through the path, climbed the 6-foot fence, walked through the woods, made the sharp left turn, walked up the driveway, and this time he was like almost over that last fence. 3 times this happened before I literally hit my head with my hand. That wasn't fighting, it was sex. They were boyfriends. So we called them Jean-Paul and Jean-Claude, and they were boyfriends for life. They hung out together every day. They went to sleep together in the coop every night. I'm not saying they were monogamous, because ducks tend not to be. But here's the deal. I was this lesbian feminist who had read this book called Biological Exuberance, which is like this doorstopper of a book that tells us the hundreds of different animals, including ducks, who engage in same-sex sex, pair bonding, courtship, displays of affection, and even child-rearing. I knew that. And yet, the presumption of animal heterosexuality was so strong that I almost broke up that couple. I did break up that couple. They just refused to be broken up.
Oh, I love that so much.
Amazing story.
I
It's
love it.
interesting.
I just
Being a kind of a lesbian imposing heterosexual norms that's really
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Oh, Sam, this is Pickle. This is Brian's sister. This is Pickle. She hasn't been on the show before. This is her debut. Hey, Pickle. Oh, I'm glad you played that story. Thank you for doing that. I love that.
No worries. So, are we done? I
feel like carrying on now. I'm well into it now.
I'll wait to be told what to do.
The power.
I think we can thank everyone for joining us today. And just say goodbye.
The McGovern family is taking over, yeah.
They are on. They're getting a taste. They just want a little taste of
that guy who co-founded that group in the 70s says hi, Pickle.
Oh, Ronnie Lee says hi, Pickle.
And so does Tom Reagan's brother.
Oh, hi, Terry says hi as well, but she's got a little tongue sticking out, ready to wash me. There she goes.
You're very kind, Sam, because there wasn't a hitch at all today.
Smooth as
it went really smooth.
There was a show in spite of the tech issues.
Yes, indeed.
Oh, Tom even got dropped out. Oh, no, thank you, everyone. Thanks for all your comments. There's been some brilliant comments. Shame we couldn't keep up with the chat about the violence. I'll have to go back and read those as well.
And we'll probably have to do a session about violence, because it seems to be an interesting topic.
Yeah, we can get that guy who co-founded the ALF to be on the show for that.
Oh,
for
yes.
That. Yeah.
Definitely.
I know we've got to finish. Actually, Ronnie did mention. Can we, if we just maybe finish with? He mentioned another activist who sadly died, Sue Smith, I believe. I don't know. It's just a little bit further up, and he said something about she was an activist. She never got caught, but she was a very prominent activist, and sadly she died.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, that one there.
Yeah, and there was one before that he was just talking about her activism. Yeah, that's the one. One of the founders of the Band of Mercy, which was not Ronnie's pop band. It was actually the kind of the group that they formed before ALF became into being. It was the first name.
Did you just say pop band?
Pop band, yeah. So it's not his pop band.
It
sounds like it could be, couldn't it?
It was a punk band. It wasn't a pop band.
Wasn't even that though, was it? Band of Mercy.
No,
that's what I'm saying. It wasn't a pop band.
Okay, all right.
Well, you can't be nasty to me today. I keep telling you this, right? It's International
I'm
Women's
never
Day.
nasty to anybody. Everybody knows that. Don't they, Tom? Oh yeah. Well,
don't stick up for him, Tom. Don't stick up for him.
Ronnie's renamed it Grand Pop Band. So right. Well, I'm knackered after all that tech work, so I think we better go, folks. So
you're fired after all that tech work.
Oh, there'll be a completely different setup next week, folks.
Your computers must be white hot.
I'll be in the chat going, "Let me in, let me in."
So, are we going? We are going.
I'm just waiting to be told what to do.
Oh, okay. No, we're going to go then.
Okay. Oh, we're going to go. Right.
Yeah,
goodbye then.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Bye,
See you next time.
Bye.